Fast Market on the TD Ameritrade Network. I'm Tom White, joined by my co-host Kevin Hinks. But let's bring in our next guest for our cash tag segment, and that's going to be Andy Swan, the co-founder of LikeFolio. Thanks for being here today, Andy.
Yeah, thanks for having me.
All right, we're talking Nvidia. Shares are down over 40% so far this year. It hit an all-time high last November, like every other tech stock, it seems like. So this one's been getting punished, but it's been, highly loved as far as the tech name goes. They're in a bunch of different silos as far as revenue generation. Some are, doing well. Others aren't. We've seen some data out of gaming that's actually pulled back a little bit. They don't really have a lot of competitive pressures because they're leading in so many different segments within their company. But what are you guys seeing on the sentiment side of this name going into these results after the close?
Yeah, I mean, Nvidia is one of our favorite companies and has been for a long time. It's really the backbone of a lot of the next generation of technology, we think. And when we break it down, what Nvidia is really powering is a truly innovative future. We look at the ability for cars to drive autonomously. That relies on Nvidia chips by and large. There's increasing demand for electric vehicles, which have really high levels of technology in them. Nvidia powers a lot of those. Virtual reality usage, and you mentioned online gaming, PC gaming. Both of those we're seeing up a little bit, but that's a substantial pullback in trajectory over where we were over the last year. So while those numbers are up in terms of the number of people interested in those, the trajectory has shifted because they were growing at a much faster pace than that. I think that worries the market. The other thing that really worries the market about Nvidia is its ties to crypto and the way that its chips are one of the go-to players for the mining of crypto, especially Bitcoin. And when interest in crypto starts to fall, which you can see in the prices of cryptocurrencies, that can have a severe impact on Nvidia's most profitable sales segment. And so, going into this report, we're pretty neutral from an earnings perspective. We think it's kind of one of those listen in kind of earnings calls. Maybe react afterwards. But from a long-term perspective, we think Nvidia is definitely the leader, the market leader, one of the most respected in the world in all of the categories that we see making a huge difference in the world over the next 3 to 5 years. So 40% pullback from highs. I have to start thinking about a stock like this long term. But as we go into earnings, there's a lot of headwinds that are going to be brought up in this call and a lot of landmines. So I think this is one where it's best to kind of stay the side and maybe see what they have to say.
Andy, I love a good cliche, right? And a good cliche for this overall market and its relationship with Nvidia is throwing the baby out with the bathwater. Now that sounds harsh, but what it means is you discard something of value at the same time you're discarding something that's undesirable, right? The entire market might be undesirable, but Nvidia is valuable. It doesn't line up with all the other problems that some of these growth companies has. They make money. They're still growing. They may not be growing at 50% or 43% like they did in 2021, but they're expected to grow 30%. Still a good number. I mean, they are on the cutting edge of a lot of things. It's not like they're unprofitable. That's one that's been a big problem for some of these companies. They've punished the companies that are unprofitable. That's not the case. They're expected to make about $1.29 on $8 billion in revenue. So isn't this just an idea of when the overall market sells off, and you're right, there are issues with cryptocurrency, and there are issues with, a recession could lessen consumer spending, and interest rates could damage profitability going further. But this is a company still doing most things well and still growing at an incredible pace. Are we throwing the baby out with the bathwater here when we trade Nvidia down from 346 to 166?
Yeah, I really think we do. Of course, you can you can look back and say maybe we got ahead of ourselves, last fall. I think that's very fair as well. There's probably some truth in the middle between those two. I do think when I look at Nvidia, what I see is a company that's facing the headwinds it's facing are short term, in my opinion, and the tail, which is supply chain, inflation, recession, those things tend to not last that long, at least in recent history. But the tailwinds that they have and the things that they're really good at are all of the things that you and I on this show talk about all the time. As 5 years, 10 years from now, how is the world going to be different? Are cars going to be driving themselves? Are we going to be using virtual reality or augmented reality technology to improve our lives? Are we going to be, our cryptocurrencies going to become more mainstream? All of these things add up to Nvidia doing really, really well over the next 5 to 10 years. And so I think it's just a matter of which lens you want to put on. If you want to put on a short-term trader lens, then I think there is the possibility of a bumpy road ahead. If you want to put on the long-term investor lens, I think this is one of the best companies that is focused on the most innovative, game-changing technology sectors in history. And so it just depends which pair of glasses you want to put on. But going into this earnings call, I think we're going to have some really interesting commentary from the company that will impact all of technology. So I'd encourage people to listen in.
Yeah, I kind of like that angle, Andy, where you're okay with sitting on the sidelines with this, even though the anticipated move going into this earnings event is really big. But I look at your chart here and the mentions, 30-day moving average on year-over-year percent change. Autonomous vehicles, I still think we're 4 or 5 years away from even getting a semblance of that. PC gaming pulling back a little bit. You mentioned the crypto aspect of it. Now, there's still a lot of supply chain issues there too, but is this a wait and see where maybe you don't trade this stock or invest in it at this point? You'll kind of wait out, get some guidance from them. But in the long term, this is going to be the leader in a lot of these silos that you've got kind of cordoned off here.
Yeah, I really think so. This is a company that's proven that it can execute really, really well. And I will say, what you guys are so good at, as you look at the options chains and so on that you look at, and you mentioned a extremely large expected move going into this. What that means is the puts are probably pretty expensive and probably have a really high premium on them. So we can look at those out of the money puts as a way to either collect some income or position ourselves to pick up some shares at much lower prices if the stock does fall victim to kind of the baby out with the bathwater type of mentality that's in Wall Street right now. So I'll let you guys get into that. That's what you're great at. But I do think that going into earnings, even if you want to sit on the sidelines from a directional trade perspective, if you have a long-term vision and a company that you like, those earnings moments can be pretty lucrative, even if you're not putting your stake in the ground right at that moment.
Yeah, and if you did have an earnings score going into this event, what's the number on that one?
Yeah, plus 13, which is pretty close to zero, pretty neutral.
Gotcha. Great stuff as always, Andy. Appreciate the breakdown here of Nvidia.
Thank you.
Yep, that's Andy Swan, the co-founder of LikeFolio. Kevin, now